Hello, dear students. It's time for Unit 2 in English Exploring Puzzles. Now, you all have solved puzzles and you always enjoy it. So, this chapter is also such fun chapter because we will be solving different kinds of puzzles. So, let's start with activity 1, which is a story in which there is a puzzle. So, let's start. Emperor Akbar was a great and wise ruler, and he had fine advisers in his court, but the wisest of these was Birbal. Whenever the emperor thought of a difficult problem or puzzle, he turned to Birbal. So, here it's a story about the Emperor Akbar. We all have heard about him, and we have seen or heard various stories of Akbar and Birbal. So, this is one such story. Now, in his court, he had fine advisors, the ministers who will give him nice ideas or will share their thoughts. But the wisest of these advisors was Birbal. And whenever the emperor thought of a difficult problem or puzzle which he cannot solve by himself, he turned to Birbal. He asked Birbal's thoughts. One pleasant evening in March, Akbar was strolling in his courtyard. To stroll means to take a leisurely walk. ऐसे ही टहल रहे थे. He had just completed a successful military campaign in the east and he wanted a little amusement. Military campaign means in the war fronts, and also he had been successful after that after that tiring task. He wanted a little amusement. He wanted some fun. Suddenly, he turned to his courtiers and said, Courtiers are the member of the courts. And he said, Tell me, what should be the punishment for someone who dared to tweak your emperor's mustache? So, while they were just strolling, they were walking, he just turned to his courtiers. Akbar turned to the ministers, the advisors, and he said, like, tell me, what do you think should be the punishment? Who thinks, I mean, who thinks like who is that foolish or who is that brave or who is that disrespecting towards the emperor to tweak. To tweak means to pull and turn it, or to twist it. Your emperor's mustache. Emperor, the great ruler. What shall be the punishment for someone who pulls your emperor's mustache? The courtiers were shocked at the thought. Only the most foul criminal will dare to touch the king. Shahbaz Khan spoke up. My lord, this villain should be mercilessly flogged to death. So, when the courtiers heard that what should be the punishment for somebody who dares to tweak the emperor's mustache, to twist the emperor's mustache, what should be the punishment? So they were shocked, like how can someone even do that? Only the most foul criminal we all know is the person who commits a crime, and the most foul means who is really bad, who is the worst criminal, will dare to touch the king. This is an utter sign of disrespect. Shahbaz Khan, he was one of the courtier, he said that this villain should be mercilessly flogged to death. Flogged means it means to hit somebody several times. You are hitting hard with the help of a stick or a long thin piece of leather, whip. It's like chabuk se without having mercy. He should be killed by hitting him several times. Until he dies, he should be flogged. He should be whipped. Beheaded in full public view, Your Honor, said Mullah Do Piazza. So Mullah Do Piazza, who is another courtier, he says that he should be beheaded. Sar qatl kar dena chahiye in full public view, in front of the whole public. The villain shall be thrown down from the fort or be hanged, said Shadi Shah. Another courtier said that he should be thrown from the fort or he should be hanged. You all know, फांसी पे लटका देना. And you, Birbal, what punishment do you suggest for this offender? Asked the emperor. So after listening these thoughts of other courtiers, he turned to Birbal and he told, like, what punishment do you suggest for this offender? Offender means who has committed a crime. Shah Alam said Birbal calmly, I will give him some sweets. Now, let's see what's the reaction. The other courtiers gaped at Birbal. Had he gone mad? Sweets for such a crime? Surely this time Birbal was wrong. Now, the other courtiers gaped means they were shocked. You know, when you are shocked or you're surprised and your mouth remains open, like, huh? And they were like, this time is Birbal gone mad? How can somebody give sweets for such crime? This time they thought that Birbal was wrong. Akbar frowned. Frowned means to give a crooked smile or displeasing smile. You are smiling but it's not a happy smile. Did I hear you right, Birbal? मैंने सही सुना ना? He said, you consider giving sweets to be the right punishment for such a crime? Where somebody is playing with my mustache, with somebody is playing with emperor's mustache, he is tweaking it, he is pulling it, and you think that they should be given sweets? Only in this case, your majesty. So he is praising that only in this case, just this time, said Birbal humbly, because who else but your beloved grandson will dare to take such a liberty with the king of kings? So he calmly said, he is really wise, but he does not have that that pride. But he is very humble, he is very polite, and he's saying, because only your beloved grandson, who is just a child, and he is playing with his grandfather, so only he will take the liberty with the king of kings, Raja ke Raja, emperor. Only he will tweak your mustache. For a child, it does not matter whether you are the king or a servant, you are just playing with them. Akbar burst out laughing. You are right again, Birbal. It was indeed that little rascal who tweaked my mustache this very evening. Rascal is somebody who is not showing respect to other persons. So that here he means it in a good way for his grandson. It was that little rascal who tweaked my mustache this very evening. Today only that thing happened, and he told that again Birbal was right. Match A with B and make sentences using the words given in the table A. So let's start. Here I have given the direct answer. The answer is written in front of the word. First word is strolling. It means walking in a slow, relaxed way. Dumbfounded. It means extremely surprised. To gaze. To look at someone in surprise with an open mouth. Insolence. It is rudeness. Outwitted. It means tricked someone. Smirked. It means smiled in an unpleasant way. Now let's see certain sentences which I have made. You can use your own sentences. Sentences using the words from column A. Every evening I go for strolling with my parents. The news left me dumbfounded. Mohini gazed at him in some amazement. Divyang's insolence cost him his job. The room was littered with discarded newspapers. Somehow he always manages to outwit his opponents. Chiranjeev smirked when Neil told him the bad news. Activity 2. Birbal was able to solve the emperor's puzzle because he thought clearly and realistically about the emperor's question. He did not just jump to conclusions. He did not make any false assumptions. He did not make assumptions. An assumption is something that is believed to be true without any evidence. There is no proof, but you assume, you think that this will be the true case. Sometimes making an assumption is correct. For example, if your relative falls asleep very early in the evening, you might assume that he is tired, and you might be right. If somebody slept early, your relative slept early in the evening, what will you think? That he must be tired. And you may be right. You do not know whether he is tired or not. You assumed it. But assumptions can be wrong, and they can lead us to think incorrectly about problems. So, we don't have evidence all the time. So, they can be wrong. And if the assumptions are wrong, we can think incorrectly about problems. The courtiers heard the emperor's question. Tell me what should be the punishment for someone who dared to tweak your emperor's mustache. The courtiers heard the question, and what did the courtiers assume? After hearing the question, we can think like the courtiers assumed that some evil man must have played that mischief with the emperor, and he should not be pardoned. He should not be left at any cost. He should be punished. Which lines in the story help you to know what the courtiers were thinking? How can we say, like, the courtiers thought that he should be punished? From the lines, from their thoughts which they express, the punishments which they suggest, they show what the courtiers were thinking. Only the most foul criminal will dare to touch the king. This villain should be mercilessly flogged to death, beheaded in full public view. The villain should be thrown down from the fort or be hanged. These lines show what the courtiers were thinking. Activity 3. Now, after that puzzle, here there is another one. Let's see. A dad and his son were riding their bikes and crashed. Two ambulances came and took them to different hospitals. The man's son was in the operating room, and the doctor said, I can't operate on you. You are my son. How is that possible? Now you can read the puzzle once again, and there is no mistake here. You have to solve this puzzle just from your understanding. A dad and his son were riding their bikes and crashed. They were going and they crashed. Two ambulances came and took them to different hospitals. So the dad and son are at different hospitals. The man's son was in the operating room, and the doctor said, while the son was in operating room, the doctor said, I can't operate on you. You are my son. How is that possible? Now, if you have thought the answer, or if you know the answer for this puzzle, you can answer this during the live class, but let me tell you the answer. It can be possible that the doctor, we assume that the doctor is a man, but even for female doctors we use the term doctor, so it can be that the doctor is mother. And so this is the one example how we can say that it is possible that if the dad and the son are in different hospitals, so the mother was there and she told that I can't operate on you. Now, this answer is to be done during the live class. How many people guessed the reason that the surgeon could not operate on the boy? How many people could not guess? How many people have heard the joke before? If people do not know why the surgeon says he is my son, what assumptions are they making? Assumptions that are incorrect and lead us to think wrongly are called false assumptions. So, if you were not reaching the answer, it's because you were assuming, but that is not true. It was a false assumption, hence, you cannot reach the answer. Activity 4 is the Pardoner's Puzzle. This puzzle has been printed uh, in the about a century ago, and it has been published and all. And the thing is that this is totally a fun activity, so you guys can do this in your textbook only. There is a diagram given which you have to solve. You have to reach from one destination and you have to complete all the regions. So that's a totally fun activity which you can solve by yourself in your textbook. Activity 5 is one more story of Akbar and Birbal. One day, walking in the garden with Birbal and the other courtiers, Emperor Akbar bent to pick up a sharp stone. With it, he drew a line on the ground and said, Birbal, make the line shorter. He paused, and with a glint of mischief in his eyes, he said, But don't touch it, just make it shorter. So, one day, again, while they were walking casually in the garden with Birbal and other courtiers, Akbar bent to pick up a sharp stone. With the help of a stone, he drew a line on the ground. And then he asked Birbal, because he was the wisest of his courtiers. He wanted to prove himself, like Birbal cannot always win. He is not always wise. Sometimes there can be somebody else who is wiser than him. So he asked Birbal, make the line shorter. You have to make this line short. But he paused and with a glint of mischief, with a small look of mischief, from his eyes, you can say like he was thinking of something mischievous. With that look, mischievous looks, he said, But don't touch it. You have to make the line shorter without touching it. The courtiers looked at each other. Birbal surely couldn't do this, could he? Perhaps he will finally be outwitted. To outwit means to prove that you are smarter than him. So the courtiers looked at each other and they thought like, how can you make a line shorter without touching it? You have to rub it or so. So, but Birbal calmly bent down to pick up another stone. He quietly drew a second line below Akbar's. Everyone looked at the two lines. Akbar's line was clearly shorter than Birbal's. Here you can see the two lines. The first line has been drawn by Akbar and the second line has been drawn by Birbal. So we can see that the second line which Birbal drew was longer than Akbar. And if one line is longer, the other line automatically becomes shorter. There was a brief silence, like there was a short silence, and then Akbar smiled. I thought I had outsmarted you this time, but you have done it again. I thought I will prove that I am smarter than you. But again Birbal won. Birbal did not make the line shorter than it was when Akbar first drew it, but he made Akbar's line shorter than his line. Akbar's line cannot be said to be short. It can only be longer or shorter than another line. Short is not an absolute concept, it is a relative concept. Akbar's line is shorter relative to Birbal's line. As we think about puzzles and problems, we want to be sure that our assumptions are correct. We also want to remember that many things cannot be described in absolute terms. They can only be described in relative terms. A rich man may think that a dosa is very cheap, but a poor man will think a dosa is very costly. Cost is a relative concept. During winter, you may feel that the weather is very cold, but the weather is probably very warm relative to the weather at the South Pole. So, how did Birbal uh, outwit Akbar? He did not reduce the length of the line of Akbar's line. He just drew a longer line. So here the word short, it does not mean like something which is short will always be short. Something which is short will be long compared to another thing which is really short. So it is relative. Absolute means something which is fixed, irrespective of changes in any other condition, irrespective of its comparison, its relation with other thing. If it is remaining same, it is absolute, but it changes from person to person, it changes from location to location, it is a relative concept. So here cost, the example is given of dosa, a dosa which is about which costs around 100 rupees. So a poor man will think it's very costly, but a rich man will think it's very cheap. So here cost is a relative concept. Same way when we talk about weather, or we can say like cold. So what we feel here, even 9 degrees or 10 degrees, we feel that it is very cold. But if we compare it to the weather at the South Pole, that 10 degrees will be relatively warm. There it goes in minus 50 and all. So that way, weather or even cold or warmth, those are also relative concepts. So after that, you have to fill this table by yourself. What you think? Well, here I have given the answer that tall is a relative concept. Rich is also a relative concept. Free as well is a relative concept, because we are not just talking about one meaning of the word free. Like without any cost. Buy one, get one free. That means it's for sure that you do not have to pay for anything. But here free can be also used for different words, like are you free right now? That depends on how you utilize your time, or that way. Then dead. Dead is an absolute term, because once or somebody who is dead here will also be dead somewhere else. Or poetically, we may say that he may be dead, but he is alive for me. But that's not the thing. It is an absolute concept. Then educated. Educated also is an absolute concept, because uh, we have different degrees. Like somebody can be graduate or postgraduate, somebody may be a doctorate, but after a certain criteria, if they have studied till certain level, if they have got the basic education, we can say that they are educated. Then beautiful. Beautiful also is a relative concept. So that's it for today. The later part from activity 7 to 10 we will do in the next video.